Thank you for listening to Depictions Media Radio. Welcome to Policy and Rights, the show about government policy and human rights. Welcome back to Policy and Rights here on Depictions Media Radio. I'm your host, Michael Clogs. Healthcare is, good healthcare in the country. It helps keep people happy. It helps keep people going, and they can do stuff, and it's a cornerstone of how a society is treating one another. Healthcare, it should be more than just simply passing out medications. It should be a lifestyle that is brought forth to people so that they can live happily. They can live with the wealth of their body being able to do the things it should be able to do. It should also support the mindset so that people know that they can do what they need to do. A government that suppresses people, that's not in support of the people's pursuit of happiness. So, with all that, Justin Trudeau was meeting today with some healthcare workers around the government's plan to supporting healthcare and helping people live better. Along with this, we're also going to hear some reports about what's happening in Ukraine. We're going to hear from Mélanie Joly as she spoke at the United Nations. We're also going to hear from the Minister of Defense as she's talking from a shipyard and congratulating people and thanking people for their shipbuilding skills and how it supports a nation like Canada. We're also going to hear from the United Nations with their press conference around things with Ukraine and Palestine and how things are happening around the world with humanitarian efforts. And we're also going to hear from the UN General Assembly speaking about the end of the first year of the war that is happening in Ukraine after the vicious invasion from Vladimir Putin and Russia.
Hello, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here at the SEIU headquarters in Richmond Hill with Charlene Stewart, the president of the SEIU. It was an opportunity for me to sit down with extraordinary personal support workers and hear their stories. We all know how important personal support workers are to our healthcare system, to our care system. They were there for the most vulnerable during the pandemic. They continue to be there through extremely difficult times. The challenges they're facing is stretching them and burning them out, and we need to do a better job of stepping up as governments to make sure that we're giving them the support and respect that they need. That's why we've put forward $1.7 billion towards raising their minimum rates to $25 an hour, which is pretty much the bare minimum that they're going to be able to continue doing their job in. But we also need to make sure we're improving their working conditions. That's why we put out a study last month on minimal conditions in long-term homes across the country, because we know that working conditions dictate conditions of care. And how we support the personal support workers who do this incredible work right across the country really matters. We also need to do better around retention and looking for retirement benefits for them as well. These are things that the federal government will be there for, but we will also be working on with the provinces. And I'd actually take a moment to encourage all politicians at all different orders of government to take time to sit down with personal support workers like I got to today, to hear the stories, to hear directly how much they care about the people they serve. And about the grandparents of all of us that they take care of in situations that are extremely precarious and not there for them. J'ai pu passer un peu de temps aujourd'hui à Richmond Hill avec des préposés aux bénéficiaires pour voir à quel point ils sont là pour servir les plus vulnérables dans notre société. On sait à quel point la pandémie a été difficile, mais que ça continue à être difficile pour nos travailleurs de première ligne. J'ai pu entendre directement les défis auxquels ils font face. C'est pour ça qu'on a mis de l'avant 1,7 milliard de dollars pour aider à augmenter leur paye minimum jusqu'à 25 dollars par heure. On va aussi travailler sur les conditions de travail et les opportunités qu'ils auront pour la retraite. Mais nous avons besoin de travailler avec les provinces là-dessus. Alors j'encourage tous les premiers ministres, tous les différents politiciens de différents niveaux de s'asseoir avec des préposés aux bénéficiaires pour comprendre à quel point ils font face à de vrais défis. Over the past weeks, we've been talking a lot about healthcare because 2 weeks ago we put forward a plan for $198 billion of investment over the next 10 years in healthcare systems across this country, with a focus on making sure that we deliver altogether real results for Canadians in a public, universal healthcare system. These are things that really matter to Canadians. Canadians take pride in our healthcare systems, but they also know they're not hitting the level that Canadians should and could expect from their systems. That's why the 4 areas that we're focused on investments with the provinces and improvements of the provinces are access to primary care doctors. Canadians need access to primary care doctors to make sure they're having the right entry into our healthcare system, getting the primary support they need. That'll make huge changes and improvements in our system and the results for Canadians. We also need to do a better job of supporting and retaining and properly being there for the people who work in our healthcare systems. We need to do better around licensing and credential recognition. We need to do better around working conditions and support for people who are taking care of all of us at all levels within our healthcare systems. We need to do more, thirdly, on mental health, because we know that mental health is health. A number of years ago, we invested $5 billion over 10 years to the provinces on healthcare. We've continued to step up with investments around healthcare, but we know as well that healthcare must be woven through the rest of the healthcare system. Mental health must be woven through the rest of the healthcare system because it affects everything from the workers to the patients to everyone who is supporting people going through difficult procedures. Finally, we're there for better data and better information collection. Canadians need to be able to have confidence that their medical files are complete and accessible by the specialists or emergency room doctors they see. And we need to make sure that we're seeing clearly the results right across the country that we're investing in and getting better results from our healthcare system. So there's a lot to do, but there's a lot we're going to continue to do together. And I just really want to thank the leadership at SEIU, but also those personal support workers and all healthcare workers across the country for continuing to step up to be there for Canadians, and we will do everything we can to be there for you, like you are there for our most vulnerable. On a aussi fait, une couple de semaines, des investissements, annoncé des investissements dans nos systèmes de santé pour améliorer les résultats pour les Canadiens, que ce soit au niveau de plus d'accès des médecins de famille, plus d'aide pour la santé mentale, de meilleures conditions de travail pour tout le monde qui travaille dans notre système de santé et aussi de meilleures informations et des meilleures données sur lesquelles on peut bâtir les bons résultats de nos systèmes de santé. On a encore du travail à faire, mais on est là pour être partenaire avec les provinces pour livrer de meilleurs résultats pour les Canadiens parce que c'est ça, ce dont ils ont besoin et ce qu'ils méritent. Merci beaucoup. Je suis content de prendre vos questions maintenant.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Merci, Premier Ministre. We have 10 minutes for questions from media. CBC, à vous la parole.
Good morning, Prime Minister. Simon Dingley from CBC. Good to see you again, sir. What can you do to restrict access to migrants who are trying to cross into Canada at Roxham Road?
For years, we have been focused on closing Roxham Road. The challenge is not to say, oh, we should close it. The challenge is how to close it. How to make sure that people aren't choosing to cross irregularly into Canada to protect the integrity of our immigration system, but also stay true to the values that we have. It would be unfortunate to put up barricades and close Roxham Road only for border crossings to open up elsewhere along the 6,000 or so kilometers of border that we have with the United States. The way to close Roxham Road is to renegotiate the Safe Third Country Agreement with the United States, which is something that we've been working on for many, many, many months now. We're making real progress. But until we manage to do that, we need to continue to support our immigration system. We need to make sure that the resources are there, particularly for the province of Quebec that has been stepping up significantly in accepting people fleeing for a better life, people crossing irregularly. And we will continue to be there for Quebec. We will continue to be there for our international obligations, and we will continue to be there to try and make sure that we have a safe and secure and rigorous immigration system.
Follow-up.
Je vois la même réponse en français pour Radio-Canada aussi.
Oui. Merci, Simon. Ce qu'on veut depuis plusieurs années, c'est de fermer le chemin Roxham. La question, c'est pas est-ce qu'on devrait le fermer. La question, c'est comment est-ce qu'on la ferme. Parce que mettre des barricades au chemin Roxham va tout simplement amener les gens à traverser ailleurs à travers les 6000 kilomètres de frontières qu'on a avec les États-Unis. Ce dont on a besoin, c'est de renégocier l'entente des tiers pays sûrs pour s'assurer qu'on ferme au complet toute possibilité de traversée irrégulier. Et on est en train de travailler avec ça, sur ça avec les Américains. Ça fait bien des mois, des années qu'on parle de ça et on est en train de faire du progrès. Mais d'ici là, il faut qu'on continue à être fidèle à nos valeurs et aux ententes internationaux d'être accueillants pour les migrants. Mais il faut aussi qu'on continue d'être là pour les Québécois qui, en particulier, ont été extrêmement généreux pour accueillir et absorber ces individus-là qui ont traversé. On est en train d'être là pour le gouvernement du Québec. Je comprends qu'il faut qu'on en fasse davantage et on va continuer de le faire. De fermer Roxham Road, c'est ce que nous voulons tous. Mais il n'y a pas de solution simpliste là-dedans. Il faut la fermer pour que notre frontière reste intègre à travers le pays. Et c'est sur cela qu'on est en train de travailler.
Sticking with Roxham for my second question, sir. This year, 70,000 migrants are expected to pass through Roxham Road, yet the refugee board's only able to handle about 25,000 per year. What's your government going to do to prevent the backlogs from getting even bigger and bigger?
We have, over the past years, actually increased the numbers of processing capacity in Canada. We've increased the tools that the refugee boards have, the way that they can treat more cases, and we've actually added people to that. Canada remains a country that is not just welcome to immigrants and to refugees, but we need to continue to accept refugees and immigrants in this country as we see the shortage of workers for jobs that we have across the country. It leads to economic growth. It leads to more construction. It leads to more opportunities for Canadians. And Canadians remain one of the few countries in the world that is unequivocally in favor of immigration. And that is something that we have to protect, something that we have to support. So we are making those investments to make sure that everyone can continue to have support, have confidence in our immigration system. It's something we're continuing to work on.
En français aussi, s'il vous plaît.
Nous avons investi dans nos capacités de traiter les dossiers de réfugiés. Nous avons augmenté le personnel aussi et nous allons continuer de faire ce qui est nécessaire parce qu'on sait que le Canada a une énorme bonne fortune d'être un des pays au monde qui est accueillant pour les immigrants. Les Canadiens savent que les gens viennent et créent des emplois, créent des opportunités, créent de la croissance économique, enrichissent notre pays. Mais ça doit être fait de façon rigoureuse et organisée. Et c'est pour ça qu'on continue à investir pour s'assurer qu'on a la capacité de bien traiter ces dossiers rapidement.
Next question.
Hi, Prime Minister. Jessica Smith with the Canadian Press. Federal protocol says that there would be a public announcement from the Election Interference Task Force if they determined that an incident or an accumulation of incidents threatened Canada's ability to have a free and fair election. No such announcement was made, but now we're learning more details about those threats in bits and pieces. Why can't the task force share what they learned and why they came to this conclusion? And why should Canadians trust you when you say this interference didn't influence the outcome?
I think taking a step back, let's understand that this is an extraordinarily serious issue. The issue of the integrity of our elections, the integrity of our democracies, is something that all democracies around the world are struggling with right now because we are seeing systematic attempts at interference by countries like China and Russia and others who want to destabilize democracies, who want to undermine people's confidence in their institutions, who want to sow chaos in people's confidence in their democracies. So this is something that needs to be taken very seriously, as we have. Back in 2019, looking at what was happening around the world, this government took action and created an independent, nonpartisan panel of top public servants informed directly by all the intelligence agencies working on this issue to be able to ensure and to reassure Canadians that the integrity of our elections held. This doesn't mean there hasn't been interference. Of course, we have talked openly for many, many years about the real threat of interference and attempts by interference that countries like China continually do within our democracies. And we have continually increased not just that tool, but other tools that our security agencies have to follow up on that. So Canadians can and should continue to have faith in their institutions around this. And they need to know that everyone is taking this seriously. What is not serious is putting a partisan spin on this, is playing political games to try and get partisan advantage out of undermining people's confidence in our institutions. It's not a partisan issue. This is an issue where foreign countries are trying to undermine people's confidence in our democracies and destabilize those democracies. And when we lean in on partisanship around this, We're actually helping them in doing their work of sowing confusion and mistrust. Canadians can and should have trust and confidence in their institutions, regardless of how they feel about whichever political party happens to be in power. And that is the serious work that all parliamentarians need to do together. And I'm very pleased that there's going to be a parliamentary committee leaning in further on this subject and talking to top experts so that all parliamentarians and all Canadians can see that this is an issue that we are taking very seriously and that everyone must take seriously.
Thank you. And one follow-up. A Liberal MP, Jennifer O'Connell, called questions about these details Trump-style politics. Do you think questions Canadians have about this issue are illegitimate?
No, I think everyone should be worried about the fact that countries like China and Russia and others are continually trying to spread misinformation and disinformation, trying to interfere in our elections, unsuccessfully so far, according to the top public servant experts, according to our intelligence agency's official reports. But it is something that we should all be alert to. I think where we should be careful as responsible leaders and in dealing with this seriously is to not fall into some of the political partisan traps that are out there right now. It's not about one party versus another. The foreign governments and foreign actors are trying to undermine people's confidence in democracy itself and amplifying and giving partisan reasons to mistrust the outcome of an election, mistrust the experts at Elections Canada and in our security services and our top public servants who are saying that the election integrity held. That's something that we've seen from elsewhere is not a good path to go down for society or for democracy.
Hi, Prime Minister. Heather Wright, CTV News. You mentioned earlier that you wanted to see changes to the safe third country agreement. Can you give specifics into what you would like to see changed as part of this?
Those are conversations ongoing with the United States. We had a model during the pandemic that was reasonably effective. I think there are continually ongoing conversations about how we can ensure that it's not beneficial for people to try and cross the border at great personal expense, at great personal risk in some cases, to try and get into Canada if it doesn't actually end up in them being able to claim asylum status here. That's something that we're looking at in terms of spreading the protections that happen at border crossings around safe third country to happen between border crossings. But those are ongoing conversations with the Americans that are continuing to progress.
Last question.
The Conservative leaders suggested yesterday that Roxham Road can be closed without renegotiating the safe third country agreement. Is that the case? Can it just be closed without that discussion with the United States?
Could somebody put up barricades and a big wall? Yes, if Pierre Poilievre wants to build a wall at Roxham Road, someone could do that. The problem is we have 6,000 kilometers worth of undefended shared border with the United States. And as we saw with tragedies at Emerson, as we've seen in challenges elsewhere across the country, people will choose to cross elsewhere. The only way to effectively shut down not just Roxham Road, but the entire border to these irregular crossings is to renegotiate the Safe Third Country Agreement, which is serious work that we are doing as a government right now. So people can toss out simplistic solutions. That's their right. But if someone wants to seriously solve the problem, you're going to have to roll up your sleeves and do the work as we are.
Thank you. That will conclude this
Merci beaucoup tout le monde.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Now we will turn the floor over to the Minister Joly of Canada, Foreign Minister of Canada. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ambassador Harper. Thank you for this opportunity to join all of you and my friends, Mitro, Minister Kuleba, and other ministers at this essential event to hear firsthand accounts of some of the consequences of Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Il y a un an, une invasion à grande échelle d'un voisin souverain semblait inimaginable, mais pour les Ukrainiens, c'est devenu leur réalité. Today, Ukrainians are not only defending their country from the evil of Putin and his enablers, they are defending their rights, the principles of the UN Charter, and the values of freedom and democracy that so many of us hold dear. There's no option but victory for Ukraine. Canada will be there to support Ukraine's fight for freedom for as long as it takes. And once they win, we will help them to recover. Last week, I was in Ukraine to reaffirm just that. I met with courageous and resilient Ukrainians from all walks of life who are passionate about rebuilding Ukraine once they are victorious. In our conversation, it was clear, for reconstruction to be inclusive and enduring, it must address both the physical and invisible impacts of Putin's war on men, women, and children, victims of the war. And so we must tackle the psychological marks of the war with the same seriousness and urgency as the physical scars. To heal the trauma that has been inflicted on the population, we must support survivors in seeking justice. This pursuit of accountability will be essential to achieving lasting peace in Ukraine. The efforts Ukrainians are making to provide relief to their fellow citizens, even as the war rages, is inspiring in a world awash in too much suffering. It drove home for me the need for the international community, of all of us, to continue helping Ukraine. Let me be clear. Russia's war on Ukraine is unjustifiable. It is illegal. Russian forces have committed and continue to commit indiscriminate and appalling acts across Ukraine. They have destroyed entire cities, targeted hospitals and playgrounds. In an act of incredible horror, they have ripped children away from their homes. They have taken the lives of too many families. In Ukraine, I met with the Prosecutor General to discuss his work to gather evidence and prosecute those responsible for crimes linked to the war, including conflict-related sexual violence. He is dealing, as we speak, with some 60,000 cases, and this number climbs with each passing day. The details included in each are horrific, yet those figures do not provide a full picture of the widespread human suffering occurring each of the 363 days of Putin's war. For every individual who is willing to tell their story, many others go unreported due to the stigma and feelings of shame, as mentioned by First Lady Zelenska a bit earlier. And I also met with Ukrainian police officers, psychologists, prosecutors, and investigators who are working to investigate and prosecute these crimes while supporting survivors of this violence. And Canada will continue to support them. Those responsible for this suffering will answer for their crimes. They will be met with the full force of the law. Canada welcomes Ukraine's case against Russia at the International Court of Justice, and we continue to support the International Criminal Court's efforts in Ukraine. We have also joined the core group launched by Ukraine, my friend Mitro, in examining the proposal to establish a special tribunal on the crime of aggression, a crime which may not fall within the scope of existing institutions. Together, we will leave no stone unturned as we identify the most effective ways to hold Russia accountable for its crime of aggression. This is also aimed at deterring others who are watching us, considering if they could ever challenge the rules. The emergency session of the General Assembly will meet today and vote tomorrow on a resolution on UN Charter principles underlying a comprehensive, just and lasting peace in Ukraine. Je sais que les Ukrainiens comptent sur le soutien de la communauté internationale pour les aider à parvenir à la paix. And Canada calls on all member states to support the resolution and, through it, to continue supporting the principles of the UN Charter and the people of Ukraine. Thank you. Merci.
Here to see you today. Thanks so much for everything you do. Thank you. And great to see a diversified workforce too. Just love it. Thank you.
Okay, and the minister will take a few questions. If everybody's ready, can take a minute. If you could just state your name and your outlet before the questions. I'll just give everyone a minute to get set up. You guys give me the thumbs up back there when you're all set and your sounds are all good. Yeah, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Bonjour tout le monde. I'm very happy to be here at Seaspan today and VSY. We are so grateful for the work that employees and workers, just like those here with me today, are doing for the Government of Canada to produce the ships that we need, not only for defense purposes, but also for research purposes. And one of the purposes of my visit today is to say thank you to the workers at the shipyard here in Vancouver. Et aussi, c'est une semaine très importante aussi parce que c'est une année depuis le commencement de la guerre dans l'Ukraine. And I was meeting with Ukrainian families yesterday to continue to reiterate Canada's long and short-term support for the Ukrainian armed forces and for the sovereignty of Ukraine. Nous sommes ici pour Ukraine, pour les règles internationales fondées sur une ordre très important. Ça, c'est incroyable pour la protection de notre monde et aussi pour la démocratie en Ukraine. Donc, je pourrais recevoir vos questions aussi. I can take a few questions if you like.
Thank you, Minister. Chuck Jane with the Canadian Press. The Globe and Mail reported this morning about the discovery of buoys, surveillance buoys from China off the Arctic coast last fall. I was wondering if you can comment on whether Canada is considering updating its laws regarding marine research or perhaps even preventing Chinese icebreakers from entering Canadian waters.
We are fully aware of the buoys and, as mentioned, extracted those buoys. We are also aware that this type of activity is not new, and we will continue to do what is necessary in the protection of our Canadian population, as well as contributing to the work that our allies are doing. Our Five Eyes, as well as NATO allies, are extremely important in this question. Anybody else?
Another question? There's a mic here if anyone wants it, but go ahead. Oh, here, do you have a list there?
I'm with City News, Minister. What are Canada's plans on those Chinese monitoring buoys you just mentioned and that were intercepted, and how concerned are you on Beijing's interventions in Canadian affairs, including interference in recent federal elections?
So prior to the holidays and the beginning of 2023, we released our Indo-Pacific strategy. And in the Indo-Pacific strategy, we indicated that we will challenge China where we ought to, and we will cooperate where we need to. And that is exactly the approach that the Government of Canada writ large will continue to take. But we have to remember that the Indo-Pacific is not just about one country. It is about ensuring that we maintain a Canadian presence there overall. And so Here in Vancouver, we really see the necessity of ensuring a Canadian presence in the Pacific, given that we are a Pacific country ourselves. And as I said, and as you witnessed when NORAD shot down the suspected balloon over central Yukon last week, we will continue to do what is necessary in the protection of the Canadian population and, of course, our airspace together with NORAD and our American allies.
Jane Side with the North Shore News. I'm wondering how concerned should Canadians be given the recent activity with the spy buoys and the spy balloons that we've witnessed, and will Canada be changing its approach to our Arctic sovereignty?
So this is a great question. We have to make sure that we continue to do what is necessary to protect our Arctic, to maintain our Arctic sovereignty. As Defense Minister, I have been meeting with fellow Arctic defense ministers from all countries on the Arctic Council except Russia to continue this discussion of how we together guard against any threats to Arctic sovereignty, but also to address climate change realities that are affecting the Arctic and Arctic waters. In addition, we have to remember that Canada is investing almost $40 billion in NORAD modernization and continental defense. What that means is that over the next number of years, we are going to upgrade our defensive capabilities on this continent. We are going to be building a new Northern Approaches surveillance system to replace the North Warning System. We are going to put in place an over-the-horizon radar system, which, as it is able to detect threats further and further north, will protect us and will maintain and enhance our Arctic sovereignty. The work on continental defense, the work on Arctic sovereignty must be done in conjunction with Indigenous peoples. I have been in touch with Indigenous counterparts and Northern peoples to ensure that what we do and the economic benefits that will accrue from NORAD modernization will be shared among Northern communities writ large.
Thank you, Minister. My other question is regarding the any updates on the recovery of the debris of the object that was shot down over the Yukon. I know the announcement was made recently that the search has officially stopped. What is the next step in terms of how Ottawa is going to go about in terms of recovering the debris going forward?
So just to clarify for everybody, there was on February 11th a suspected balloon over central Yukon, about 40,000 feet up, which was shot down by NORAD. Both Canadian and American planes were in the air in order to ensure the protection of Canadians and Canadian airspace. The territory, the terrain is very rugged and very remote. Temperatures are very cold, and it was snowing very heavily. And what that meant is we had a number of different crews on the ground and in the air. RCMP, Canadian Armed Forces, FBI, Special Forces as well, in order to try to recover that debris. Over the weekend, the RCMP called off the search for that debris and wreckage. What that means is that we are continuing to work with our American counterparts who did recover debris off the coast of Myrtle Beach to ensure that we are extracting any data that may be relevant. But rest assured, our priority from a defense standpoint is the protection of Canada and Canada's population. And as the shoot down of the suspected balloon over central Yukon exemplified, that will always be our first priority, and we will leave no stone unturned to ensure the protection of our country.
Does the Canadian government believe that the the balloon that was shot down over Yukon, was that military or spy balloon in nature, or was that just a research balloon or a private balloon that we shot down?
So I am not a person who will jump to assumptions without facts. And at this point, because we have not recovered debris, it is impossible for me to make a statement of fact relating to the origins of the balloon. At this point, we will continue to work with our American counterparts to ensure that we do recover whatever data they can from the debris that they have recovered off the United States eastern coast. And we will continue to ensure the protection of the Canadian population as well as our airspace.
Should we be concerned that the balloon floated over British Columbia the whole way before anybody really alerted the Canadian public about the balloon, the other balloon that they eventually shot down over Myrtle Beach?
I will tell you that the surveillance that NORAD undertakes is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They leave no stone unturned in terms of detecting any threats or potential threats in Canadian airspace. And that is why we saw on February 11th the shoot down of the suspected balloon. But I want to reiterate that I am here in Vancouver at Seaspan to thank the workers that put their time and effort every day to building ships that the Canadian population needs, and many of which go towards the defense of our country. As Minister of National Defense, my priority is to ensure that the Canadian Armed Forces have the capabilities that they need to protect and defend this country, and that's exactly what my priority will continue to be going forward. Thank you very much.
Records. Yeah, but you were entertained. There were a couple of opening acts, you know, and
Well, they're the opening acts?
they were the opening acts today. Yeah. What? Yeah, I'm gonna bring it home. All right, good afternoon. No, I don't need to tell you we're pleased to welcome Millicent Mutuli because you've heard her. This afternoon at 3 p.m., I'm sure you heard from Paulina, there will be the General Assembly session, emergency special session on Ukraine. The Secretary General will deliver remarks and expected to stress that the invasion of Ukraine is an affront to our collective conscience and is a violation of the UN Charter and international law. Those remarks were shared with you. This morning, the Secretary General opened the meeting of the Committee on the Exercise of the Inalienable Rights of the Palestinian People. He noted that the meeting takes place as the situation in the occupied Palestinian territory is at its most combustible in years. He drew attention to today's deeply concerning news in which an operation by Israeli security forces and ensuing clash in Nablus left 10 Palestinians dead and over 80 injured. The Secretary General added that the situation in Jerusalem and Al-Quds is becoming more fragile amidst the provocations and acts of violence in and around the holy sites. The position of the United Nations is clear, he said. The status of Jerusalem cannot be altered by unilateral action. Mr. Guterres said that 2022 was the deadliest year for Palestinians since the UN's Humanitarian Office began systematically tracking fatalities in 2005. 2 months into the new year, the violence rages on without reprieve. Our immediate priority, he said, must be to prevent further escalation, reduce tension, and restore calm. Turning to our relief efforts for the earthquake in Syria, a UN humanitarian mission took place today in northwest Syria to Idlib Governorate. The delegation visited a displacement camp and a reception center in Harims, Salkim, and Mahrat Misrin. Medical supplies were distributed in 3 hospitals. The UN team also met with representatives of civil society. Today, 17 trucks crossed Bab al-Hawa and Bab al-Salam carrying aid provided by UNHCR, the World Food Program, the World Health Organization. A total of 282 trucks have passed through 3 border crossings since February 9th. Our colleagues have found that health sector has been particularly hard hit in the earthquake, with 47 health facilities having reported damaged in the northwest of Syria alone. 12 health facilities have suspended operations, and 18 are only partially functioning. Meanwhile, in Turkey, the UN's disaster and assessment coordination teams remain active in Malatya, Kahramanmaraş, Adıyaman, and Gaziantep and Hatay. As of today, 15 international urban search and rescue teams from 13 countries are remaining in Turkey, and that's according to the Turkish authorities. We are coordinating rapid needs assessment with shelter, food, health, water, and sanitation remaining our top priority. UN agencies continue to support the government-led response and deliver critical supplies, including food, blankets, tents, hygiene kits, medical supplies, and kitchen items to people impacted by the earthquake. Also, the Deputy Special Envoy for Syria, Najat Roshdi, convened the International Syria Support Group Humanitarian Task Force in Geneva today. At the outset of the meeting, Geir Pedersen briefed the task force members on his recent visits to the region in the aftermath of the quake. Ms. Roshdi reiterated there must not be a politicization of response or of aid. She stressed that the parties with influence must work to ensure that humanitarian assistance can travel through all areas. Travel note, the Deputy Secretary General Amina Mohammed will leave New York to travel to Stockholm and Uppsala in Sweden, where she will meet with senior government officials and other partners. She will also deliver the annual Dag Hammarskjöld Lecture. On Monday, February 27th, she will travel to Niamey in Niger until 2nd of March to attend the 9th session of the African Regional Forum on Sustainable Development. She will meet there with UN resident coordinators in Africa and senior regional UN officials. She'll be back in New York on March 5. The Security Council this morning held a meeting under the theme Somalia, a women, peace, and security perspective. Briefing council members was the Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General for the UN mission in Somalia, Kiki Gebeho, She welcomed the Somalia federal government's continued commitment to implementing the women, peace, and security agenda, as demonstrated by the launch of the National Action Plan on Security Council Resolution 1325. Ms. Gebeho said that al-Shabaab continues to pose a serious threat to peace and security in Somalia, adding that the 2022 is the deadliest year for civilians since 2017, with 60% increase in civilian casualties compared to 2021. The Deputy Special Representative also noted that 5 consecutive rainy seasons, the current drought is unprecedented in severity in Somalia. She warned about the humanitarian needs that are continuously rising. Also briefing was the Executive Director of UN Women, Sima Bahous. She stressed that it is only when women are included in all areas of public life that we will have a chance at peace and ensuring that we support the rebuilding of a society that is resilient to future shocks. By doing so, she said, you will be amplifying the voices of Somalia fighting for these goals. Both remarks have been shared with you. You saw that yesterday we issued a statement in the evening in which the Secretary General strongly condemned the attack against a UN peacekeeping convoy in Bandiagara in Mali. The convoy drove over an improvised explosive device which killed 3 of our Senegalese peacekeeping colleagues and severely injured 5 others. The Secretary General recalls that attacks targeting UN peacekeepers may constitute war crimes under international law. That full statement was shared with you. Just a quick update on the status of the wounded. 4 of the 5 Senegalese peacekeepers who were severely wounded in yesterday's attack in Bandiagara have been evacuated to Dakar for medical reasons, while 1 has remained back in Mali in Mopti and is listed in stable condition, and we wish all of them a speedy recovery. Quick update on Cyclone Freddy, which hit eastern coast of Madagascar yesterday. And the cyclone is now projected to emerge in the Mozambican Channel later today and re-strengthen before making landfall in Mozambique on Thursday. And as a reminder, Mozambique had been devastated by a cyclone a few years back already. We and our humanitarian partners are supporting the government in the response and have started providing assistance to some 7,000 people who were evacuated from their homes. We provided food, camp management, emergency telecommunications equipment. Nutrition supplies were replenished at the health centers ahead of the cyclone. Assessment will start tomorrow to determine the full extent of the damage and the response needed for Madagascar. Turning to the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the government and the UN and the humanitarian community today launched an appeal in Kinshasa for $2.25 billion to provide life-saving assistance to some 10 million people this year. 1 in 4 Congolese, which is 26.4 million men, women, and children, cannot meet their basic food needs. Some 6.4 million people are impacted by acute malnutrition, a figure that has not decreased in the last 2 decades. The DRC is the country most impacted by food insecurity in the world. It is also a country with the largest number of internally displaced people on the African continent. Years of violence and insecurity have driven 5.7 million people from their homes. In recent months, there have been a worrying spike in violence in the eastern provinces of Ituri and North Kivu, as we've been telling you. Last year's humanitarian response plan, which called for $1.9 billion, was only 48% funded. We call on the international community to be very generous with this appeal and all our humanitarian appeals. From the Central African Republic, the peacekeeping mission there reports that protection efforts by peacekeepers in Luru in Wampende Prefecture resulted in the release of more than 100 people who had been held by armed elements who had attacked their village. The mission dispatched a patrol in the area and responded robustly, forcing the armed group to flee. Among the civilians released, 2 people were wounded, were evacuated to a local hospital. The security situation on the ground remains calm, and peacekeepers have established a position in the area. Meanwhile, the mission continues to provide support to the process of local elections to be held in July. The peacekeepers sensitize civil society, including women, on local governance in Boar. In Bangassou, peacekeepers help to promote women's participation in the DRC in collaboration with members of the High Council for Good Governance. So a couple more notes. In Myanmar, our team tells us that according to a new UNDP report, a quarter of people living in the poorest areas of the capital Yangon have not had any income in the last 12 months. Out of 3,000 people surveyed by UNDP in the capital, more than a third said they were eating less, and over 1/4 said their families are doing without medical treatment or medication. To tackle the issues, a new initiative was launched with UNDP, UN Women, and UN Habitat to improve vulnerable people's income and access to basic services. We're boosting vocational training for young people, bolstering micro and small enterprises, and improving access to health care and clean drinking water. Last year, we reached 25,000 people who have now access to affordable clean water. This year, our colleagues aim to reach 450,000 people. And another note from the UND Development Program. Today, they said that debt savings of up to $148 billion could be unlocked by the SDG stimulus plan. In a new policy brief, UNDP identifies 52 low and middle income developing economies either in debt distress or at risk of debt distress, accounting for more than 40% of the world's poorest people. It outlines the steps needed to reverse the current debt crisis and shows the potentially transformative impact of dealing with debt and expanding access to lower cost and long-term maturity funding, 2 of the focus areas outlined in the SG's stimulus plan released last week. More online. Tomorrow at 1 p.m., there will be a briefing by Josep Borrell, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy. He will speak to following his annual briefing to the Security Council on the European Union-UN cooperations in the field of peace and security. 5 p.m., there will be a press briefing by Catherine Colonna, the Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs of France. And we end on a pleasant note from the Balkans. We say thank you to our friends in Sarajevo and Ljubljana for their full payments to the regular budget. Bosnia-Herzegovina and Slovenia paid, taking us up to 56. Celia, and then Edie, and then Deji.
Steph, not too long ago, Olivier Salgado, the spokesperson in Mali from the mission, was expelled. Now it's the turn of the Human Rights Director. So how is the Secretary General reacting? And is it going to stop here, there, or are they going to expel everybody?
For the authorities in Mali, how we react. Well, no, I mean, you're asking me where it's the decisions that were taken that led to the departure of those two people were decisions taken by the government of Mali. You have to ask them. I mean, it's not decisions by us. How the Secretary General reacted, I would refer you to the briefing on that day where we issued a statement in which we very much regretted the decision and also underscore the fact that the concept of persona non grata does not apply to the United Nations. Ms. Lederer.
Good afternoon, Excellencies. You're most welcome to the chamber, and you're kindly requested to take your seats. The 7th plenary meeting of the 11th emergency special session of the General Assembly is called to order. Before proceeding further, I would like to remind members that all meeting participants are encouraged to consider wearing a mask while indoors, including in the General Assembly Hall and in conference rooms. Members will recall that in paragraph 5 of its resolution ES 11/5 of 14th of November 2022, the Assembly decided, I quote, to adjourn the 11th emergency special session of the General Assembly temporarily and to authorize the President of the General Assembly to resume its meetings upon request from Member States. End of quote. In this regard, I should like to draw the attention of the delegations to document A/ES 11/14, which contains a letter dated on 10th of February 2023 from the permanent representatives of Albania, Australia, Canada, Guatemala, Japan, the Republic of Korea, the Republic of Moldova, Turkey, Ukraine, the United Kingdom, and the United States, and the head of the delegation of the European Union to the United Nations, addressed to the President of the General Assembly, requesting the resumption of the 11th emergency special session of the General Assembly. I intend to conduct the proceedings of this meeting in accordance with the rules of procedure of the General Assembly and the past practices of its emergency special sessions. In keeping with established practice, I should now like to invite the attention of the General Assembly to document A/ES 11/15 concerning Member States that are in areas in the payment of their financial contributions to the United Nations within the terms of Article 19 of the Charter. May I take it that the Assembly duly takes note of the information contained in this document? It is so decided. In this connection, I should like to recall that at the 12th plenary meeting of the 11th emergency special session, the General Assembly decided to follow the provisions of Resolution 77/2 of 7th of October 2022, by which the Comoros, Sao Tome and Principe, and Somalia are permitted to vote in the General Assembly until the end of this 77th session, and to also allow these member states to vote at the 11th emergency special session. The General Assembly will now resume its consideration of Agenda Item 5, entitled, I quote, Letter dated 28th February 2014 from the Permanent Representative of Ukraine to the United Nations, addressed to the President of the Security Council, S/2014/136. In connection with this item, the Assembly has before it a draft resolution issued as document A/ES11/L7 and draft amendments contained in documents A/ES11/L8 and A/ES11/L9. Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, today we mark the grim first anniversary of the war in Ukraine. 1 year of despair, displacement, destruction, and death on a scale of not seen in Europe in decades. The staggering scale of loss defies the human ability to absorb. Thousands of civilians and soldiers dead, countless more injured. 8 million refugees spread across Europe and beyond. 6 million internally displaced, 2/3 of them women and children with families separated, often not knowing about the fate of their loved ones. And the systemic targeting of civilian infrastructure, which has left millions of Ukrainians without energy, water, and heat in the depth of winter. To be clear, the targeting of civilian infrastructure is a direct violation of international humanitarian law. When these are the headlines of our day, we are indeed in a new chapter of history. We are facing stark choices about who we are as an international community and how we will rebuild the trust lost among us here in this hall and in us by the peoples of the world. The choices will either set us on a path of solidarity and collective resolve to uphold the tenets of the UN Charter, or a path of aggression, war, normalized violations of international law, and collapsed global action. Excellencies, the General Assembly has condemned in the strongest terms Russia's aggression against Ukraine and its morally and legally indefensible war against its sovereign neighbor. For a full year, the General Assembly, the Secretary General, and the international community have been consistent and vocal in our calls to end this war and to adhere to the UN Charter and international law. But it bears repeating today. Aggression is illegal. Invading a neighbor is illegal. Annexing another country's territory is illegal. Over the past year, every member state represented in this hall has been affected by these events. It has sparked an energy crisis across a continent and caused pernicious inflation far beyond. It has unleashed a global food security crisis in those least able to survive one, from the drought-affected Horn of Africa to war-torn Yemen to refugee camps of Syria. I commend the Black Sea Grain Initiative and efforts by the Secretary General, Turkey, Ukraine, and the Russian Federation to ensure the clearance of food exports for global markets. I call on the parties to support its renewal in March and to expedite inspections. The continued and timely implementation of the Grain Initiative is critical to saving lives and stabilizing global prices. It offers a strong example of crisis management in action. Against this backdrop, the threat of nuclear warfare still looms large, as do the dangers of a nuclear accident.
This is an unthinkable threat with potentially catastrophic global consequences. A nuclear war cannot be won, and it should never be fought. I express my strong support for the important work done by the IAEA to ensure nuclear safety in Ukraine. I underscore the urgent need to reaffirm commitment to global disarmament and the non-proliferation regime.
Excellencies, no one can be complacent. To all those suffering the consequences of this war, you are not forgotten. We see you. We hear you. Across the UN system, we are working tirelessly to find solutions to your plight and to accompany you on the road to reconstruction. I commend member states that have already begun to provide that assistance, and call for further support to rebuild the country. In the General Assembly, there has been firm support for a political solution. 3 resolutions adopted during the 11th Emergency Special Session have referenced political dialogue, negotiations, mediations, or other peaceful means. A solution based on the UN Charter and international law, and one that respects Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity within its internationally recognized borders. Excellencies, this war will come to an end, and the time of reconstruction, reconciliation, and transformation will come. We know it will not be easy. We know the scars are deep. Culture, family bonds, sports, arts, and the acknowledgement of the shared destiny of humanity will certainly help nations currently facing each other in the trenches.
Please allow me to now address the leaders and people of the Russian Federation. Russia was and remains a major member of the community of nations. Other members are awaiting for Russia to come back to the pathway of bringing in and sustaining peace so as to bring in its own contribution to general stability and well-being. Your Excellencies, let this 1-year date and the suffering of the millions of people in front of our eyes over the past year serve us all a reminder here in this room that military solutions will not put an end to the war. Far too many lives have been lost. Far too many livelihoods and families and local communities. Russia can end this aggression. Russia can end the war with it began. Russia must put an end to this hellish spilling of blood.
Call on the parties and the international community to recommit to the values principles and purposes of the UN Charter. Upholding and preserving our Constitution for we the peoples must be common interest to all member states. There is no alternative. I thank you.
This show has been produced by Depictions Media. Please contact us at depictions.media for more information.